This conference will now be recorded.
I'll just come back. Hey all. Okay. Ravi, are you able to hear? Fine. Yeah. So we are done with the JDBC module, right? We are done with 4 discussions and we have completed JDBC. And when it comes to ORM, we started discussing about Hibernate. So basically in Spring Core, what we discuss, Spring JDBC, what we discussed is instead of using plain connections for doing cloud operations, we understand the importance of connection pools and using connection pools, how we can create multiple connections and how we can make wait user if connection not available and how to use that connection pool for our JDBC template or named parameter JDBC template that we understand. And after that, for ORM, right? we started discussing about Hibernate. Hibernate is a ORM tool. So how it helps is when we submit something from the views in general in Java, how we implement the view data, we will get it into controller. So if it is a string, directly the data will be populated into bean class. The directly data will be populated into bean class, and that bean class object will be given it to controller. So controller will have that bean object, same object we forward to service. Service will forward same object to DAO. And from DAO, when you want to do CRUD operations, you need not to write SQL queries and all. Instead of that, right? If you configure Hibernate, directly you can give object to Hibernate. Hibernate will do all save operations, update operations, delete operations. Okay, directly we need to give object. How it will understand where to save, how to save based on the configurations. We understand all that configurations as well. How many types of tables we create, how they used to have relations, how many types of objects create, how we put the relationship between them, everything we understand. So now we know the importance or use of Hibernate. Okay. Now if you want to integrate Hibernate, if you want to integrate Hibernate, if you want to integrate Hibernate, right? How to integrate it? If you want to integrate Hibernate in Spring, how to integrate it and how to use it. Consider you implemented application using Spring. Here you have your form. Okay, so your form data submitting from view. When you submit this data, the data will be forwarded to controller. The data will be forwarded to controller. So as we are using Spring, right, directly we get the data into our object here. We get directly data into our object. Consider if the student registration form, when I submit registration here, the data will be populated here. Whatever data you enter here, if you enter Ravi at Gmail, something address. When you pass this data, the data will be populated into object, and that object will be given to you. And the same object will be given to you by populating data here. By populating data, the same object will be given to you. And as I said, we forward the same data to the service. To the service class, we forward the same data. Service class take it forward to DAO class. The same object reference we used to forward it. The same reference we send it to service class method. Service class method will same to DAO class, and in DAO class I want to do CRUD operations. So already I know Hibernate. Already I know Hibernate. In Hibernate, for doing CRUD operations, I need to use a session. If you want to do save operation using Hibernate, in Hibernate we need to do save operation or update operations, whatever it is. In Hibernate we have a session. Using that session only we need to do CRUD operations. Session.save, session.update, session.delete. A session object is required. How we will get session in Hibernate? Using session factory. Session factory will provide the session object. Session factory will provide session object. Using session object, we can able to do any CRUD operations. So here I implemented all my classes, controller classes, services, DAO using Spring. So here I am using Spring, and I wanted to run all these classes in Spring only. So under Spring IOC only, all these classes are going to run. On Spring IOC container only, these classes will be running. Now Hibernate is a different framework. From that framework, I need a session factory. From that framework, I need a session factory. Where you need the session factory as a dependency? Basically, DAO is dependency for my service, and service is dependency for my controller. I know how to inject them. I know how to create DAO object and inject here, how to create DAO service object and inject it here. And DAO is now having dependency of session factory. DAO is having session factory dependency. How you will inject it? You know how to create session factory. Where do you create that session factory object to inject that here? Okay, to create session factory, we know the logic, right? How we implemented. Basically, when it is a Hibernate application, we created one poser class, we created one mapping file, and one configuration file. In Hibernate, especially, we have three components, right? And it is Hibernate. We have one Hibernate bean class or Hibernate poser class, and one mapping file, and one configuration file. So using this configuration file only, we do create session factor and session. All this stuff will be configured one into another. Poser will be configured into mapping. Mapping will be configured into configuration. We generally configure posers into mapping file, and the mapping file we configure into config. Finally, using config only, we are going to create session factor. That's how we did here, right? If you see, I have a student poser class with properties ID, name, email, along with their respective setters and getters. And I need to create a mapping file. In that mapping file, I need to tell where this poser class need to map into which table. This is my poser class. This is mapping to this table. And in this poser class, I have ID. This ID should be DS ID in this table. I have a name in this poser class. This should be DS name in table. I have email in poser. That should be DS email in table. So this is how we create a mapping file to understand where our data need to save. Okay, poser class, mapping file, and configuration file. In configuration file, we put all the driver properties, username, passwords, and the connection pool property, dialect, which means on which database you are going to run it, and do you want to create tables automatically or not? Do you want to see internally generated SQL queries? And what are all the mapping files? That everything we configure under configuration file. Then how we save it? First, we create a configuration container class and we load XML into that configuration container. Then we create a session factory. So these 3 lines of code is required to generate the session factory. To generate the session factory, what I need, these 3 lines of code is required. If you carefully observe, one configuration object and configuration dot configure and session factory SF, cfg dot build a session factory. Okay, so this is how you need to write 3 lines of code to generate session factory. So why I'm saying that is, I need a session factory as a dependency into my DO class. The session factory as a dependency I want, but to create the session factory, you need to write these 3 lines of code. Where I should put these 3 lines of code, where I need to put these 3 lines of code to get my session factory object. Is there any configuration that we discussed before in Spring Core? If you want to put some logic to create any object, and if you want to use that object anywhere, we discussed about factory design pattern, if you remember. So what I will do is, I'll create a class Hibernate session factory. It's your own session factory object. Hibernate session factory implements factory bean. Implements factory bean. We are doing it from Spring side. This is for integrating. Okay. So Hibernate is a kind of special. If you consider this is a new add-on to your car, how you will going to fit this to your car? Let's say you want to add a new tire. You need to use nuts and bolts to fit that tire into your car, right? Similar way, here I have a Hibernate. It's a special tire. This tire I want to integrate with my DAO. So now this will help like fitting Hibernate into DAO. So by using this session factory, you are going to fit it. How you'll fit it? So in this factory bean implementation, there is an important method name called public object get object. There is a method name called get object. You need to use this get object method to create factory bean. You need to override this get object method. Inside this get object method, keep these 3 lines of code. I need a session factory. Create your session factory inside this get object method. When you have to integrate your Spring application with any other systems, right? So to get the other system object, right? Particularly to get other system object, if you have some logic, you put that logic under get object method. Get object method will help you for doing such integrations. So finally you return session factory object. So here I created a factory bean for integrating. The factory bean get object method will return you session factory object. So you can use this here. So how to configure this factory bean, you know, right? Bean ID, you need to configure Hibernate session factory class name, your bean class factory Hibernate session factory, right? HS Hibernate session factory. You just configure your bean class there in XML file. When you configure this, what will happen if it is a factory class? If it is a factory class, what it will do? It will call this method internally. Spring will create object of session factory by calling this get object method. The get object method Spring will call, and the get object method finally returning a session factory object. So you will get session factory object here. Into this ID, what you will get? You will get a session factory object here. So now you can inject the session factory wherever you want. Into your DOs, you can inject session factory. And once you get the bean until here, right? How you can say session factory dot, you need to call open session. You need to call open session from your session factory. Once you get the dependency there, then by using session, you can able to do CRUD operations. Session dot save, session dot update, session dot delete. You can play with it. Just for integrating Hibernate with our Spring, you need to create one factory bean. This is how you need to create. You need to create one factory bean. Under that factory bean, you need to override get object method. In that get object method, these 3 statements you need to put. Whatever 3 statements we are using for creating session factory. That's it. You would able to inject now your Hibernate with Spring. You would able to inject Hibernate with Spring. Let me open more Eclipse here, and I'll show you the integration end to end. Create a Spring with Hibernate integration project. Create a simple Java project. Spring Hibernate integration. Integration by using what? Factory. Using factory, we do this integration. Spring Hibernate integration using factory, we do it now. So what you need to do, create project and add library. Here I have all the libraries, Spring libraries along with Hibernate libraries also I have here. So you need not to add them separately. I have Spring ORM and Hibernate Entity Manager, main Hibernate core jar file also required, right? I believe all the jar files are here. Let us add. Okay. Now first I'll implement Hibernate side flow. Okay. To implement Hibernate side flow, what we need one bean class, and we need one mapping file, one configuration file. So just copy these two, bean and resources, put them here. Now, so I created Pozo class here. I created my Pozo class student with all the properties and the required mapping file to map to which table and the configuration file. So I have complete Hibernate setup here. Now I want to integrate it. To integrate this, what I said, I need a factory. Okay. Before that integration, let me implement Spring side also. Okay. We will implement a Spring side implementation. Spring side, what we will implement controllers, create a controller package, and create a service package, and create a DAO package. Okay. Let's implement controller. Or let's start from DAO. Okay. DAO class, student DAO. General implementation we do from DAO to controller. DAO layer first, service next, then controller. Okay, back to front. So first implement DAO. I need save operation here. Public void save student. As it is DAO, use DAO naming convention save. So what I want to save student object. So this bean is common for Hibernate and Spring now, as we are using in the same application. I'm using same bean here as an input into my DAO save method. From here, I want to save it. To save it, you need session factory. Session factory is an interface. I want to inject it. You know, right? We go with stereotypes. Repository on DAO, auto void on top of property. Now using the session factory dot open session, you need to get a session here for doing session save operation. You will get Hibernate session object here. Once you get Hibernate session object, you need to call session dot save method to save your object. Basically, you need to begin transaction here. You will get a transaction object. Once done with save operation, transaction dot commit you should call. Then finally, you can call session dot close. When you call session dot close, the session again will be returned back to session factory. This is like a connection pool only. So like connection pool, session factory will maintain session pool. So this is how you need to do save operation. I got a student object still here, and using session factory, I'm saving it. Now someone wants to call DAO class save method, right? Who will call DAO class save method service. So let's implement service here. Student service public void save student. Same thing I'm implementing, right? Same thing. I'm trying to save student data, which is coming from service. So I'm sending one object from controller to service, service to DAO. In DAO, I'm trying to open session and doing this CRUD operations. Okay. So here in service, I'm doing implementation now. If it is a service, we need to annotation name called @service, and service wants to call DAO to save it. So here you need to create your DAO dependency, student to DAO, and you can auto wire it. You know, right? We can auto wire. Now by using this DAO dot save method, you can save it. DAO dot save, pass your student object. DAO will save it. Similar way, controller. Here is my controller, student controller. So if it is a controller, we use controller annotation, public void create a student. So my controller also needs student object as an input. From here, it wants to call service. So create service as a dependency as you want to call it. So if it is a dependency on top of the dependency we configure, auto wire. And from here, how to call your reference dot save student. So finally, if everything goes well, we put success key. So now my Spring side implementation is done. Hibernate side implementation is also ready, but somewhere the connection is missing. What it is, DAO needs session factory. You know how you are going to create your DAO classes, service class, and controller classes. As you have all stereotype annotations, that objects automatically it will create by scanning all these classes. But who will create this session factory object? Somebody should create session factory object, and that should be injected here. So to create session factory object, there is some logic that we need to configure. So where do you need to do that? Either you need to use a factory, either you need to use a factory if it is a XML approach, or else we can use configuration class, or else we can use configuration class. As we are using annotations, right? Let me use configuration class only. We know, right? There are multiple annotations. Configure annotation also we discussed. Create one more package. Actually, I thought of show you factory, but that is complex one. Nothing complex. We need to write and we need to configure it in XML. But as we don't need XML based configuration, right? As we can use Hibernate session factory, as we can use annotations. Already we are aware of annotations. I'm creating same HSF class, but I'm not implementing from any factory, just using @configuration. And here, you know, right, configuration with combination of bean. So again, this is also kind of factory only. Okay, create session factory. This is also kind of factory only, but this is an easy approach. Bean and the programmatic approach. So here you need to create session factory. What 3 lines you need to bring here? Hibernate. These 3 lines of code we have, right, to create session factory. So the same thing you need to bring it here. So use configuration, then configure, then build session factory. Configuration. So which configuration it is? Hibernate configuration. So as we have annotation also configuration, one we should specify fully qualified path. Bean. Okay, session factory created. Finally, you return session factory here. That's it. So now everything configured into stereotypes. Your bean also, first this bean also will be created. Okay, configuration bean. Here what it will do, it will create, it will load your Hibernate configuration file and it will create session factory object. Session factory object will be available now to inject anywhere. As my DO needs session factory object, it will be injected here and comfortably you can use. That's all. We are done. Hibernate we bring here and Hibernate we integrated with Spring. Just load your Spring XML into IOC container and run it. So we need one more XML here. Stereotype. Okay, Spring XML. And just we need to activate our annotations using context call and annotation config. And by using component scan your packages. So our packages were, see, there is no common naming conventions that I follow. So what you need to do, you need to configure all these packages. Instead, what I'll do, I'll put a common name, com.ds.controller. It is not converted. So if that is the case, you need to give all the packages here. Controller package, DAO, I need to scan services, and one util also. In util we have configuration. That's it. Now all your classes are ready. It will scan your controller, controller object create, DAO object will be created, service also scanning, util also scanning, all the objects will be created. Okay, now load this XML and run it. Try to save your data using Spring and Hibernate integration. Let me create app, main class, main method, application context equal to new class path XML application context. Resources slash spring.xml. So just get your controller object, get bean of, what is our controller name? Student controller dot class. So you will get a student controller object here. Generally we get it from browser, as we don't have browser implementation now. I'm just passing data here. So save student, we need to pass student object here. So this is how we need to do, right? This view need to pass the data. The view data will be passed to controller. Controller will pass the same object to service. Service will give the same object here. And using save method, same object we are sending it to database, right? So you need to create that object here. Student equal to new student. Student dot set ID. ID automatic generator we added, so that ID you need not to give. Set name student.setEmail. So some record I'm trying to saving it here. Let's run it. Is it able to going to create all your objects, dependencies, Hibernate, and run it? It can. See, finally my data inserted into this table. So open Debian, check it. Select star from this. So the data inserted. I think it dropped and created new table as we configured this here, right? So this is how simply you can integrate your Hibernate with Spring. So I created Hibernate first, Hibernate bean class I created. If you start new application, right? If you want to use Hibernate, create your Hibernate bean first, then Hibernate mapping file. Okay, create Hibernate mapping and Hibernate configuration. After done with that, you configure a util class. Under this util class, I mean the configuration class particularly at the rate configuration annotation we are using. So create configuration class. Under that configuration class, create a factory method. This is the factory method. Create session factory using at the rate bean. Put that Hibernate session factory generation logic here. Configuration CFG new configuration CFG.configure. Then build session factory. Finally, you get session factory. Return this. So now this will helps you. This is the part where actually Hibernate and Spring integration is happening. So this is where Hibernate with Spring integration is happening. So this is where we are creating Hibernate object and it is making available to Spring. So this when I inject, when I return it here, then this object also will register into your application context as a bean. Now you can play with this object wherever you want to inject it. So I know how to use session factory. So and I know where I need to use this, as I need to use this in DAO. So you inject it into DAO and open session, begin transaction, using session, save it, finally commit it and close it. That's it. You are done. Your CRUD operation is done. And you know how to inject DAOs into service, services into controller. That flow you know. So DAO I injected here and the service I injected into controller. So finally, controller is having service dependency. So when controller method called, controller will pass the data to service, save method, service save method will call DAO save method. DAO will use that integration object to open session and it is doing CRUD operations on database. Okay. So this is easy approach, right? Using annotation only, it is looking easy. Okay. Tomorrow I'll show you. Tomorrow I'll show you how to use Hibernate template here instead of using session factory way of dependency injection. Using Hibernate template also we can do that. We'll do few examples tomorrow. Will that be fine?
I mean, sir, go to the table page. This not one Oracle Expression Edition.
Okay.
How to install this? I didn't get this page. I tried to install, but I didn't get.
Do you have Oracle?
Yes, I already installed.
Which version?
Version. Let me check.
So
Just wait.
try to search this home. You need to see this, go to home page, some option, go to home page. In XE editions, generally you will get this option in XE, Archil XE editions. I have this
Go
software,
to
but I
that
don't
and
know how
show
to
home
share.
page.
Yeah.
I didn't get this option.
Okay. I'll try to upload the software. Let me see
Mm-hmm.
what is the software. I have this.
Okay.
It is very lengthy. I can't able to share. But let's see.
Which version I will upload in Note
Archil
Google?
10, Archil
Or
10G Express Edition. Yeah, 10G.
Express. Okay.
10G Express Edition. Yeah, try to download. If you don't get, let me know. I'll try to share it.
Yes, sir. I want to share
Yeah,
1 minute screen. Little
yeah,
bit
but the
confused.
size is 157 MB. I'll see how I can able to share it.
I want to share screen, sir. 1 minute.
Yeah, if others doesn't have any dots, we'll go. Right, okay. So are we all clear?
Naveen, sir. I want to share screen.
Yeah, 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 Vaibhav. If
Please.
others not having any dots, I'll take his screen share. Ravi and Priya.
See one uh, configuration page where you have integrated this Spring and Hibernate ones.
Yes.
In DAO, you have auto-wired this session factory. So that
Correct.
session factory, yeah, and that integration page, integration file. Let's go to that file.
Util class.
Yes, you do. Yes.
Hmm.
So session factory, okay, you are returning from here and then you are getting directly there.
Hmm.
Okay, fine, understood. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So it is not only for Hibernate. When you want to do any integration, this class will help you a lot. Configuration class.
Okay.
So here you do that third-party implementation code or whatever it is, and finally bring that object into live, and you can inject it to anywhere. Most important thing, this is for the integration. Okay, this class is the most important one. Configuration class.
I have a doubt, like why don't we return session instead of returning session factory? Because, anyway we are going to use session, right? So instead of returning session factory, we can return session also, right? In this case.
Yeah. Session means one single object, like one connection only. Session factory means multiple connections. So at
Okay,
a time, parallelly 10 users if they request, same session will you give?
but in one
No.
year file, we need only one session, right? Because in that we will do only one transaction at a time.
Correct. But this save method, tell me, if I share student registration now as a URL for all you guys to do register, will you do guys one by one or at a time you will call?
I'll
Mostly
try
you
to
might,
call at a time.
yeah, at a time we all call, right?
Yes.
So the same save method will be called by multiple users. But that multiple users, if I use same session, will that make any sense? No, session
No.
is like a single connection. In Hibernate, there is a problem. Hibernate session will maintain caching. So
Yes.
if some data you fetch for your select operations, your private data, that will be visible to others also if I use same session.
Okay.
So I
Understood.
should not use same session. Session is like a connection you need to use for one user, one operation. Thereafter, you need to return it back to session factory again. Session factory will clear your cache and it will share that session to others later.
Understood.
Yeah. So session factory we need to use. Yeah. Yeah. Now you can share Viber.
Okay, okay.
Let me give control, make presenter. Yeah.
Oh, okay. If I open this link, just wait. Okay.
So all jars, everything available.
Just this is the Hibernate example links. If I download them, okay.
Now you got
Just
it.
wait 1 minute. This type of open, I don't know how to.
Yeah, that is a RAR file. You need to install WinRAR. Install
Which
WinRAR in
one?
your Win WinRAR. WinRAR. I shared you in the chat.
Okay, okay.
WinZip, WinRAR. Have you heard? Yeah, it's a simple application. Download and install it so that you could able to extract it.
Okay, okay, got it. Okay, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a kind of zip file only.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, got it. Okay, I will install.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, thank you all then. We'll connect tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thanks, Naveen.